Hi guys, Drea from Aloha Plant Life here. In our last video, we talked about variegated plants that are super hot and popular on the market right now that feature unstable variegation and are likely to revert back to the green forms of themselves. And if you've not yet had a chance to check out that video, I will link it down below in the description for you, as well as at the end of this video. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about some alternative plants that are available on the market that are variegated but feature stable variegation that's not going to revert. But before we get into the very first plant, I want to point out one thing about the naming conventions between these plants that we're going over today compared to the ones in the last video that's going to help you out a lot when you're shopping for plants and understanding whether a plant has unstable variegation or stable variegation. You will notice as we go through the list of plants today, not a single plant on this list has the word variegated in the plant name or the word variegata anywhere in the plant name. And that is because they are stable. All of the plants in the last video had the term variegation or variegata in the plant name somewhere. So that's a real easy way for you guys to be able to tell when you're plant shopping if it's a plant with stable variegation versus not, assuming that it's been labeled correctly, mind you. So let's just go ahead and jump right into these plants. And similar to what I did in the last video, we're going to group them together by type of plant. So we'll do all the Monsteras first, then all the Philodendron, etc., etc. Let's go ahead and jump into the first Monstera on this list. And I love this Monstera. This Monstera is going to be getting added to my wish list at some point here. And that is the Monstera Thai Constellation. So this is an excellent alternative to the Monstera albo. I realize that it is yellowish variegation and not white, but it's also an excellent alternative to the Monstera aurea, which does have yellow variegation. And this variegation is stable. This plant was basically bred by growers and they ensured that this is variegation at a genetic level, so it is stable, it will last. And because of that, I think more variegation is present on these plants than what you sometimes see on the unstable variegated plants. So once again, an excellent alternative. And our second Monstera is going to be the Monstera standleyana. So if you were slightly disappointed about that Monstera Peru in the last video, I find that the standleyana has kind of a similar leaf shape, obviously not the leaf texture, and it does have some stable, natural, creamish color variegation to it that is absolutely beautiful. So that would be another good alternative for you. So in addition to having a lot of Monsteras on the list in the last video, we also had a ton of philodendrons. So I'm going to give you quite a few philodendron alternatives next. And we are going to start with the Philodendron Ring of Fire. This is a beautiful variegated plant. Once again, yellow and green, kind of splashy-ish, speckled-ish variegation. And this leaf shape is very different than the plants that we talked about in the last video, which to me makes it even more unique. Now, similar to this one, I feel like somewhat in the look of the variegation, but a different leaf shape, is the Philodendron Jose Buono. This plant has amazing, huge, beautiful variegated leaves. It is definitely a pricey plant, but the variegation is going to last, so in my opinion at least, I think it's more worth it. Now the next philodendron is one of my personal favorites when it comes to stably variegated philodendron, and that is the Philodendron Ilsemanii. Once again, got that kind of speckled variegation look to it. Some of them can look a little bit more on the cream, almost yellow color side. Some of them actually look pretty white that I've seen. And that beautiful arrowhead-shaped leaf just makes it an excellent alternative to unstable variegated philodendron. So let's talk about Syngonium next. So good news is, in general, unlike the Syngonium albo that we looked at in the previous video, future Drea here, I realized when I was editing this video that I completely forgot to mention the Syngonium albo in the last video on plants with unstable variegation. So just know that this albo is unstable variegation, and so these next plants I'm about to talk about are your stable alternatives to this one. Most Syngonium are stable variegation plants. Your Batik, for example, absolutely love this plant. This is stable variegation. This patterning is not going to disappear over time. And for those of you who are big fans of pink plants and were not happy about what I told you last week about the Philodendron Pink Princess, the good news I have for you today is the Syngonium Pink Splash is stable. This pink plant will stay pink for you. Now, if you are a huge fan of pink plants, there are going to be some more a little bit later on this list, but I want to get into some alternatives for the alocasias that we looked at last week first. And so unfortunately, you don't really have a stable alternative of an actual alocasia that's variegated, but caladiums are very similar in look and growth pattern to alocasias, and they do have stable variegation. And there are tons of them. This is just one that I randomly picked to show on screen for you. But I also have my Caladium, previously actually known as an alocasia, Hilo Beauty. This is a stable form of variegation. And like I said, there are tons of options out there. So if you were disappointed about the unstable variegation for the alocasias, go Google Caladiums. I guarantee you'll find something that you like. So let's move on to Hoyas. So when it comes to stable variegation in Hoyas, one of your safest best bets is going to be to get one that has a splash or speckled type variegation to it. So for example, my Hoya curtisii has this slight speckled variegation on its leaves. That one is going to be stable, that one is going to last for you. Also, the Hoya pubicalyx with its splashy speckled leaves, that one is stable as well. It's the ones that have the white in it that you've got to watch out for. Now, if you've been looking at these alternatives that I've been giving you so far and thinking, okay, Drea, but none of these actually really have like white variegation. I really like the white variegation. Are you telling me that I can't find stable white variegation? Well, first of all, I want to go back to the caladiums because there are white varieties of caladiums. So once again, be sure to check those out. But there are two plants that I want to mention right now. One actually even has white in the name, and it definitely has white on its leaves. And I own one. Unfortunately, she's got spider mites again right now. But here's an example from a guy that, by the way, if you do not follow this guy on Instagram, you need to follow this guy on Instagram. Craig Milran is his Instagram name. He is based out of Australia and his plants are absolutely gorgeous. But this is a picture of one of his Calathea white fusion leaves. That's right, I said Calathea white fusion, but it does have that white variegation with that deep green. And for those of you that like that, this is an excellent alternative, and they aren't even that expensive. And now is a great time for me to point out that back in the spring, out of nowhere, we started seeing Calathea yellow fusions popping up on the market. So very similar patterning to the white fusion, but instead of the white, we have the yellow. And once again, this is stable variegation, your Calatheas, your Marantas, your anything in the prayer plant family. So another good one if you like that whiter look, and you just need to make sure really that it's getting enough light for it to become whiter and lighter. It may not reach full white, but it can get pretty close, and that is the Stromanthe triostar. So you're seeing mine here, and you can see the new leaves that have been coming in right now because we're in the peak of the growing season. They're coming in beautifully variegated, and it is stable variegation. Now, while we're on the subject of prayer plant family plants, another good stable variegated plant, especially if you like that green look with big chunks of yellow to almost creamish colored variegation, is the Ctenanthe lubbersiana. And you're seeing mine here. Absolutely gorgeous plant. Mine lost a little bit of its variegation, but it's starting to get it back now, but it had spider mites. It was quarantined in a lower lighting situation than it really probably wanted to be in. So that's why some of the leaves got more green. But that is another great thing about stable variegated plants. If you start to lose some of that variegation, most often it is related to a lighting issue, and all you need to do is get them into brighter light and that variegation will come back. Now, some other plants I would like to mention if you're once again looking for whiter, lighter variegation would be Dieffenbachias. There are a lot of types of Dieffenbachias that have kind of that lighter coloring to them, and it is stable variegation. And somewhat similar in kind of growth pattern and appearance, at least in my opinion, to the Dieffenbachias are the Aglaonemas. And if you're looking for additional pink colored plants, this is another good place to look because there are a lot of different varieties and a lot of different colors of Aglaonemas that are variegated, and it is once again stable variegation that's going to last. Now, another good genus of plants to look at if you are looking for that lighter cream to almost white colored type of variegation is going to be the Epipremnums. So I myself own a marble queen. As you can see here, beautifully variegated, marbling look to that variegation, absolutely gorgeous. The more light I get her, the lighter the coloring of those leaves is. The less light, the more kind of yellowish they start to look, but absolutely love it. I think it's really a great alternative to plants with unstable variegation. Now, I know that these next few that I'm going to talk about don't look similar to a lot of the ones that we covered in the previous video, but they are stable variegation. They are involving white variegation, and these plants all have one thing in common. It is a stripe form of variegation, if you will. So for example, Dracaenas that are variegated along the center line of the plant and or along the outside edge of the plant, that is stable variegation as well. That's not going to go away. Tradescantia, any kind of variegated Tradescantia you come across, that is stable variegation. It will stay variegated. You have the purple varieties like the Zebrina. You have the green and white variegated varieties like my Alba Vittata. So there are a lot of alternatives there. I realize this is a completely different genus of plant than what we were looking at in the last video, but I wanted to make sure you were aware that these are stably variegated as well. And the last ones I want to bring up for you guys to make sure that you are aware that they are stable variegation are all of the absolutely beautiful, what is commonly known as satin pothos. These are your Syndapsis that are variegated with that silver variegation on them. 100% stable. They are not going to disappear on you. They're just going to get either more variegated or less variegated depending on how much light you're giving them. Now, I do want to take a moment to mention a specific plant that I feel like some of you might be like, why didn't she bring this up on any of the lists? And that is the Ficus elastica Tineke and the Ficus elastica ruby. The reason I have not brought these up yet on this list or on the previous list is because I was trying to find out what kind of variegation they're actually exhibiting and if it's stable or not, and I have not been able to find what I felt like was a solid answer to the question. So I'm going to tell you what I think. I think that the Tineke is definitely stable. I think the more light you give it, the more variegated it's going to be. The less light you give it, the less variegated it's going to be. The ruby is the one that I have a big question mark on. I think the basic pattern variegation on it is probably stable because it's the same pattern as the Tineke, but I can't quite figure out, and I went through a lot of scientific papers and was like going cross-eyed trying to find out for you guys. I can't quite figure out what it is that gives it that pinkish cast to it. That pinkish cast to it is what I'm not sure is stable. And I have heard people mention before that their rubies seem to be turning into Tinekes. So I'm gonna leave it as, I think the primary variegation on the Ficus elastica Tineke and ruby is stable. I'm questioning if that pink on the ruby is or not. It appears that it might be unstable. But if you know for sure, comment down below and let me know. And if you have found this video informative and helpful, please hit that like and or subscribe button down below. And if you want to know what the heck I've been talking about all the unstable plants from the previous video, you can check that out next right here. Thanks for joining me today, you guys, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Aloha!